Vishnupalaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhagavatam Swami Niti Namene Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharini Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Privrajagacharya Stottarasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Shri A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Privrajagacharya Stottarasata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Gaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mayi Ki Jai. Yamuna Mayi Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaura Premanande.
Hari Haribol. Thank you so much, Panchatattva Prabhu. And thank you, Mataji, for the kirtan. That was so nice. And welcome everyone for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends. It is Wednesday, December 27th, 2023, in New York anyway. And we're reading in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 26. And someone will need to fill me in since I missed our last class exactly where we are tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Hare Krishna.
72.
Yes, 72.
72, yes. Lokendra Prabhu,
Yes, sir.
are you saving your voice?
Not necessarily. Why? How may I serve you? Let me find that verse here just a moment so I can post it. Probably
70.
better if I don't read right now.
Okay, no problem. I guess I'll I'll start the reading. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This is the last verse of the 26th chapter. Tamasmin pratyagatmanam dhiya yoga pravrittaya bhaktya viraktya jnanena vivichyatmani chintayet. Translation. Therefore, through devotion, detachment, and advancement in spiritual knowledge acquired through concentrated devotional service, one should contemplate that supersoul as present in this very body, although simultaneously apart from it. Purport. One can realize the supersoul within oneself. He is within one's body, but apart from the body, or transcendental to the body. Although sitting in the same body as the individual soul, the supersoul has no affection for the body, whereas the individual soul does. One has to detach himself, therefore, from this material body by discharging devotional service. It is clearly mentioned here, bhaktya, that one has to execute devotional service to the Supreme. As it is stated in the first canto, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, 1-2-7, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha. When Vasudev, the all-pervading Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is served in completely pure devotion, detachment from the material world immediately begins. The purpose of Sankhya is to detach oneself from material contamination. This can be achieved simply by devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When one is detached from the attraction of material prosperity, one can actually concentrate his mind upon the Supersoul. As long as the mind is distracted toward the material, there is possibility, as long as one is attracted, as long as the mind, I have a pretty bad cold. As long as the mind is distracted towards the material, there is no possibility of concentrating one's mind and intelligence upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his partial representation, Supersoul. In other words, one cannot concentrate one's mind and energy upon the Supreme unless one is detached from the material world. Following detachment from the material world, one can actually attain transcendental knowledge of the absolute truth. As long as one is entangled in sense enjoyment or material enjoyment, it is not possible to understand the absolute truth. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18:54. One who is freed from material contamination is joyful and can enter into devotional service, and by devotional service, he can be liberated. In the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, it is stated that one becomes joyful by discharging devotional service. In that joyful attitude, one can understand the science of God or Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it is not possible. The analytical study of the elements of material nature and the concentration of the mind upon the Supersoul are the sum and substance of the Sankhya philosophical system. The perfection of this Sankhya Yoga culminates in devotional service unto the absolute truth. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 26th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. Om Jnanatunanda Shaganandana Salakaya Chakru Manitangena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we see how at the end of the purport for the previous verse, Srila Prabhupada's anticipating the final verse. He says, only by devotional service and detachment can one perform the process of linking with the absolute. And then here it's stated Therefore, through devotion, detachment, and advancement in spiritual knowledge acquired through concentrated devotional service, one should contemplate that supersoul as present in this very body, although simultaneously apart from it. I'm looking for that concentrated in the word for word. But anyway, there it is. Concentrated devotional service. Bhaktya viraktaya jnanena. Not sure.
Right, Vivicha, very
Hmm?
carefully. Vivicha, considering carefully. Can it
Vividcha.
be?
Considering carefully, yeah, that could be concentrated devotional service, or that could refer to contemplation. Vividcha atmanya chintayet. No, there it is. Chintayet, one should contemplate. Some verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, the very important first canto, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam are referenced. Bhagavad Gita 1854. And this conclusion of Prabhupada's purport is that the perfection of this Sankhya Yoga culminates in devotional service unto the absolute truth. This Sankhya Yoga, as taught by Lord Kapila Dev, is meant for bringing one to devotional service and understanding, bringing one's understanding towards the path of devotional service so that one becomes fully engaged in that way. And there are a couple of things I noted as I was going through. There was Prabhupada says, when Vasudeva, the all-pervading Vishnu, Supreme Personality of God, is served in completely pure devotion. And then he says, the purpose of Sankhya is to detach oneself from material contamination. This can be achieved simply by devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Meaning no other corollary activity is required. Just by the process of devotional service, one can achieve this purpose, becoming detached from material contamination. That becomes as a side effect of pure devotional service. And Prabhupada goes on to explain that one can actually concentrate his mind upon the supersoul when he achieves that detachment from the attraction of material prosperity. And that attraction from the material is a disqualification. It's a disqualification. In fact, it makes it impossible to concentrate one's mind and intelligence on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada keeps hammering home this point. As long as one is entangled in sense enjoyment or material enjoyment, it is not possible to understand the absolute truth. So we are being directed again and again by Srila Prabhupada in his Bhaktivedanta purports to give up this attraction for the temporary, for asat, and concentrate our activities, our mind and intelligence upon sat. And that way you become joyful. And if it's one of the qualities of a devotee, that they're very joyful, they're jubilant. If one is morose in trying to practice devotional service, then something is not correct. He or she is not doing something quite correctly. Maybe it's their rounds, maybe it's their lack of association with devotees, maybe they become a little wayward and attracted to material objects. But devotional service by nature is joyful. So when you meet a joyful devotee who's fully engaged in devotional service, you can rest assured that their activities are becoming purified. They're purified. It's a quality of a devotee to be happy. I remember once, years and years ago, hearing how Srila Prabhupada was asked about his picture. Some devotee asked him, "Prabhupada, you look so grave in his picture." And Prabhupada said, I was in ecstasy. So there are different ways to try to understand this, but Srila Prabhupada was always on the platform of ecstasy because he was a pure devotee. He is a pure devotee engaged in pure devotional service. And devotees by contact with him also became joyful and also became enthusiastic for Krishna consciousness. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? Guru Maharaj? Anything to say? I think we're still muted, Gurudev.
Prabhupada silently references Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogata, Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana, Bhakti Sangasya Jayate. By practicing devotional service, one becomes happy-minded, Prasanna Manasa. Prabhupada elsewhere says that the first sign of a self-realized person is that he's jolly. Brahmabhuta prasannatma nashojati nakamshati samasarveshu bhuteshu bhakti labhate paran. Saraswati has a question there. Someone would like to read it.
Yeah, Saraswati says, "Pranams to all. Koti Koti Pranams Param Pujya Maharaj. Stated here that one who is freed from material contamination is joyful and can enter devotional service. But sometimes we find devotees are not always constantly joyful, but are still performing bhakti. So does that mean we should use the indicator of being joyful as how free we are of material contamination?"
So one thing, yes, mad bhaktim labhate param. When one is brahmabhuta and he's prasanatma, then he can take up devotional service. Similarly, evam prasanna manaso. But that joyfulness is not superficial. It's not happy, happy, happy. It's a more deeply felt happiness. And therefore, Prabhupada made that remark that that was a moment of ecstasy. That very sad picture. It's not that a devotee always has to be smiling and jolly and putting on the happy Mayavadi sannyasi look. But one should be, the real sign of happiness is that he's detached from material enjoyment. Nashojati nakangshati. That they go together. If I'm unhappy because I'm still lamenting for something or hankering for something, then that means that I'm not so advanced. So they go together. One increases in happiness, increases in bhakti yoga, yes. But not the superficial, jolly, jolly, jolly. Murari has a question.
Murari Gupta says, Super Soul does not have all the pastimes like Krishna does. So what are his most attractive features that inspire devotion in those who contemplate him.
That's described in Bhagavatam. Where is that, in the second canto? Second canto or third canto, or both? The physical features of the super soul are attractive, his bodily form. So the yogi contemplates the form of the Paramatma, starting from his lotus feet and gradually seeing his yellow dress, his ornaments, his smiling face, and so on. And these are all stimuli for attraction to the super soul. Also, although I don't have a verse reference, the super soul enlightens the devotee from within. From within, you did, what is that? Satadayuktanam tesham satadayuktanam tadami buddhi yogam tam yen ma vibhyanti. So the super soul is guiding the devotee, and that becomes a source of reciprocation. As the devotee receives direction from the super soul, he responds and gratefully advances in detachment and in devotional service. And Murari asks how the yogi knows what the super soul looks like before seeing him. He's described in Bhagavatam. Three 28:13 and so on. What about devotees who have mental health issues? Surapi Kunj asks. I know some devotees who are always engaged in devotional service and still struggle to be happy. But they're not happy in material life. Therefore, they turn toward Krishna. Even in devotional service, there may be disappointment, there may be, there may be disappointment. But the devotee doesn't go anywhere else. Doesn't go to karma or gyan. Yes.
Right, Gupta. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Maharaj.
Susi Priya's got something to say. By the way, while I'm thinking of it, Shito Paladi churna with honey for that cold.
What was that? I missed that.
For that cold of yours.
Yeah.
For that cold of yours, Shito Paladi churna with honey.
I'll see if I have some. That's I've had that prescription before. It's a good one. I don't know if I have, but thank you, Gurudev. It comes in waves. Tulsi Priya asks, can we make the argument that the workings of the universe and the living entities therein are part of the pastimes of Paramatma, since he is, quote, directing the wanderings of all living entities, unquote? I don't mean that the conditioned soul's material activities are his lila, but that we can appreciate how he is behind all such activities?
Yes, he's behind everything. Mayajakshina Prakriti Suyute Saturachana. And what was the other one? Undressed animal touch. He's the overseer and permitter.
Maripatra Prabhu asks or says, the analytical study of the elements of material nature and the concentration of the mind upon the supersoul are the sum and substance of the Sankhya philosophical system.
I'm just quoting from the pearl part. So, Kurumana, so basically the Ashtanga yogi, he also contemplates on the super soul, his ultimate realization, super soul realization. So his Sankhya philosophical system also basically they focus on super soul.
Yeah, that's the difference between the teachings of Devahuti Putra Kapiladev and the atheist Kapiladev. The Sankhya is ultimately meant for devotional service. What is that? Yet Sankhya prapyate sthanam tad yogara vigamyate ekam sankhyan cha yogam cha vipashyati sapashyati in Bhagavad Gita. The Sankhya and yoga are not meant to be two separate things. Sankhya yoga pratag bala pravananti apandita. Those who are not learned think that Sankhya is one thing, yoga is another thing. But the Sankhya system is meant to engage us in yoga, in devotional service. Therefore, Prabhupada's emphasizing that the sum and substance of the Sankhya philosophical system is to reach the super soul. What is that? Jnana vastata tadgatena manasa pashanti. Is that okay? Did you want to add something more, Madhupati?
No.
Okay.
And
Murari has more.
Murari Gupta says, were the yogis taught by their gurus about supersoul? My impression was they more went it alone with the instructions to search within and follow the yogic practices of asana, pranayam, etc.
No, why go it alone? To be a yogi also, one requires the guidance of the guru. Not that I just sort of slap together a system of meditation. This is quite the exacting system of yoga to do all these things. Dhyan, dharana, samadhi. So the guru's guidance certainly was there. Even the Mayavadis have their gurus, what to speak of the yogis. Shastra's there for the yogis, Guru is there for the yogis. Certainly. Then maybe they go it alone because Krishna says, what is that? Sucho Deshe Pratistapya Sthiramasanamatmana. One goes to a sacred place and so on. So there he'd be alone, but he'd have the instructions what to do.
Tulsi Priya has a comment. Murari Gupta Prabhu's question got me wondering. I find it hard to accept that Paramatma doesn't have as many pastimes as Govinda, maybe not as relishable ultimately, but as variegated and numerous. Or is he more of an omnipresence and not so active?
Tadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. That's a pastime of the Super Soul. But otherwise, we don't hear about Antaryami Lila, Paramatma Lila.
It seems his very presence and beauty alone is enough to satisfy a yogi.
He smiles lovingly. That's mentioned. With compassion.
I remember
We don't hear. Yes.
I remember in regard to needing a guru as opposed to going it alone. Just even in when I was a youngster, I became somewhat interested in Hatha Yoga, and I read a particular book by a particular popular Indian teacher of Hatha Yoga, and he kept saying again and again, "You need a guru to learn this, to do this stuff correctly." And with pranayam, he was more adamant. Even he said, "If you don't take the guidance of a guru, you can hurt yourself very badly by trying to practice these things based upon something you read or something someone else told you. You have to have a qualified teacher."
Tad Vijnanartam Sagurumeva Bhigaschet. Any path you want to take, the guru is there.
So, shall we begin the chapter 27? We're going from fundamental principles of material nature to understanding material nature. Would someone like to read?
I'll read.
Okay, thank you.
Understanding Material Nature, Text 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prakritistopi Purusho Najyate Prakriter Gunai Avikarad Akartritvan Nirgunatwaj Jalarkavat. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The personality of Godhead Kapila continued. When the living entity is thus unaffected by the modes of material nature, because he is unchanging and does not claim proprietorship, he remains apart from the reactions of the modes, although abiding in a material body, just as the sun remains aloof from its reflection on water. Purport. In the previous chapter, Lord Kapila Dev has concluded that simply by beginning the discharge of devotional service, one can attain detachment and transcendental knowledge for understanding the science of God. Here, the same principle is confirmed. A person who is detached from the modes of material nature remains just like the sun reflected on water. When the sun is reflected on water, the movement of the water or the coolness or unsteadiness of the water cannot affect the sun. Similarly, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, Bhagavatam 1.2.7. When one engages fully in the activities of devotional service, bhakti yoga, he becomes just like the sun reflected on water. Although a devotee appears to be in the material world, actually he is in the transcendental world. As the reflection of the sun appears to be on the water, but is many millions of miles away from the water, so one engaged in the bhakti yoga process is nirguna, or unaffected by the qualities of material nature. Avikara means without change. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that each and every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and thus his eternal position is to cooperate or to dovetail his energy with the Supreme Lord. That is his unchanging position. As soon as he employs his energy and activities for sense gratification, this change of position is called vikara. Similarly, even in this material body, when he practices devotional service under the direction of the spiritual master, he comes to the position which is without change because that is his natural duty. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, liberation means reinstatement in one's original position. The original position is one of rendering service to the Lord, bhakti yogena, bhaktya. When one becomes detached from material attraction and engages fully in devotional service, that is changelessness. Akartritvat means not doing anything for sense gratification. When one does something at his own risk, there is a sense of proprietorship and therefore a reaction. But when one does everything for Krishna, there is no proprietorship over the activities. By changelessness and by not claiming the proprietorship of activities, one can immediately situate himself in the transcendental position in which one is not touched by the modes of material nature, just as the reflection of the sun is unaffected by the water. This is one of those purports that's, in my limited educated view, is like, it's like a prose poem all by itself. It's so beautiful. And it's relatively, I don't even want to use the word relatively. It's a complete thing. It's like a person could get so much, a person who's never come into contact with Krishna consciousness could get so much just from this purport alone. It's really concise, comprehensive, beautiful. You know, this could inspire anybody to become Krishna conscious. And I like it's very encouraging to hear. I think to me this ties in with what was being discussed before, how Maharaj was saying that, you know, even when practicing devotional service, there's, you know, it's not this false superficial happiness, you know, that puts on a show. You know, all the emotions are present within devotional service, but that core sense of joy is what's there when a person is fully in Krishna consciousness. Yeah, he may have, you know, we read about Prabhupada having anxieties because of this project and devotees, you know, having problems and all this sort of thing. But we know that there was always that core feeling of joyfulness because he was always in contact with Krishna. So in the same way, you know, we can be in the material body and going through all the, you know, problems, vicissitudes of material energy impacting us, but we're really living in transcendence if we can, you know, be focused and fixed on devotional service. That part about changelessness, I just noticed in the last word of changelessness, there's a little typo there. The letter E is missing. But anyways, that idea of changelessness, that you're solid, you're fixed, you're unmoving. It's that in itself is enough to give one joy. You know, obviously in connection with the Supreme Lord, but to not be tossed about by the, you know, the waves of the material ocean, and you're just, you know, very solidly focused on your service and who you are and who Krishna is. It's that in itself is a sense of joy. Beautiful, you know, wonderful, happy things don't need to be happening for you to be joyful. You can be joyful in all circumstances. I think of, you know, like, to use a mundane example, somebody who's maybe engaged in a very dangerous and difficult profession, a soldier or a firefighter, or, you know, not so obvious, you know, like a mother giving birth. There's all kinds of stuff going on, but they have a purpose, and in that purpose, they're fixed and they're joyful. And that's just a temporary material situation. You know, it can just as easily go the other way, and they're not happy. But we have seen examples of that, you know, in the mundane sphere. So imagine how much more. It's not even calculable if someone is firmly fixed on their service and firmly fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord. How can they not be happy all the time, even if externally things appear to be, you know, not the most pleasant or joyful? Inside they're joyful.
Thank you, Tulsi Priya.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Akendra Prabhu. Oh, go ahead, Maharaj.
No, let's hear from you.
Okay. Akendra Prabhu writes, in his purport to Canto 3, Chapter 7, Text 1. Might be 27. Chapter 27, Text 1. Srila Vishwanath references Srimad Bhagavatam 10.143. And that's Jyotiryataya Partiveshvadaha Samira Veganugatam Vibhavyate Evam Savaya Rachitesha Saupuman Guneshu Raganugato Vimuhyati. When the luminaries in the sky, such as the moon, the sun, and the stars, are reflected in liquids like oil or water, they appear to be of different shapes, sometimes round, sometimes long, and so on, because of the movements of the wind. Similarly, when the living entity, the soul, is absorbed in materialistic thoughts, he accepts various manifestations as his own identity because of ignorance. In other words, one is bewildered by mental concoctions because of agitation from the material modes of nature. Thank you, Kendra Prabhu.
I find it interesting here that the qualities described in the verse are the qualities of the soul under any circumstances. Asango hiyam purusha. The soul is by nature avikara, akritavan, akarkritvan, nirgunatvat, nirgunatva. He has all these qualities by nature. He has nothing to do with material energy. He's changeless. Avikaryo yomuchate. He's not the doer. So these are the eternal qualities of the soul. Yet Prabhupada, connecting with the previous verse, attributes these qualities to the devotee. And that's fitting because when the devotee or when the soul identifies with water, with material nature, then he is affected by these things, or superficially or apparently affected, the way that the sun on the water appears to be moving. He thinks he's going through all these changes that have to do with the material world, because he's identifying with this body, which he's not. But when one is factually engaged in devotional service, then Prakriti Stopi, even though he's situated in the material body, he's not affected by the modes of nature, by the qualities of nature, because he's situated in his real position. Therefore, he's described as Jivan Mukta Suchate, as a liberated soul, even while within the material world. Nirgunatvat, he's unaffected by the qualities of nature. Jalarkavat, like the sun and the water. Okay. There's also a question from Saraswati.
Saraswati. Saraswati says, we are told that Krishna's form, pastimes, name, etc. are all on a transcendental platform and not ever under the influence of the modes of material nature. But I read that chanting the Mahamantra can be in the modes of goodness, passion, ignorance. So how can that be possible? Chanting the Lord's name is always on the transcendental platform. Yoganananda says, it's not the name, it's you. Not meaning you, Mother Saraswati, but the person who's chanting.
Vishwanath Chakravarti, when there's purification of the mind, the concept of self also becomes pure. The scriptures say the mind is the cause of bondage and of liberation. So that's reinforcing what Prabhupada says, that when the mind is pure, then our self-identification, our concept of self is pure. So in that way, these qualities pertain finally to the devotee.
Could it be said, Guru Maharaj, that in that state, the spiritual qualities that the jiva shares with the Supreme Personality of Godhead become manifest?
Yeah, Mukta Sangasya Jayate, he becomes freed from material existence and he becomes qualitatively one with the Supreme. Do we want to go on to the next verse?
Sure. Mari Gupta has a comment. Prabhupada wanted his disciples to be happy and also in anxiety for Krishna. So it seems like a contradiction because anxiety is not normally relishable. So we have Vaikuntha, no anxieties. But Mahaprabhu exhibited a type of ecstatic anxiety that permeates Vrindavan. Is this why it's known to be the highest platform?
Yeah, to be in anxiety for Krishna is relishable.
Shall we go to the next verse? Let's see. Madhupati Prabhu, would you like to read the next verse and purport?
Yeah, I can. But I think Tulsipriya Mataji or somebody's having
Yes, she has read.
Okay. No, somebody has a question. They have a raised hand.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to agree that with Maharaj before that in experiencing anxieties out of love for anyone, I mean, we have, if we experience the anxieties because we love them, so in that respect, they're relishable. So with Krishna, there's none of the inebrieties of anxieties we have for others, Happy to have them.
So, Madhupati Prabhu, would you like to read?
Okay.
Thank you.
स एषयार्हि प्रकृते गुणेषु अविविशजते अहङ्क्रिया विमूढात्मा कर्ता अस्मिति अभिमन्यते. When the soul is under the spell of material nature and false ego, identifying his body as a self, he becomes absorbed in material activities, and by the influence of false ego, he thinks that he is the proprietor of everything. But actually, the conditioned soul is forced to act under the pressure of the modes of material nature, the living entity has no independence. When he is under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is free, but when under the impression that he is satisfying his senses, he engages in sense gratificatory activities, he is actually under the spell of material nature. In Bhagavad Gita it is said, Prakriti-kriyamnani, Bhagavad Gita 3:27, one acts according to the particular modes of nature he has acquired. Guna refers to the qualities of nature. He is under the qualities of nature, but he falsely thinks that he is a proprietor. This false sense of proprietorship can be avoided simply by engaging oneself in devotional service under the direction of the Supreme Lord or his bona fide representative. Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita was trying to accept for himself the responsibility for killing his grandfather and teacher in the fight. But he became freed from that proprietorship of action when he acted under the direction of Krishna. He fought, but he was actually freed from the reactions of fighting. Although in the beginning, when he was non-violent, unwilling to fight, the entire responsibility was upon him. That is the difference between liberation and conditioning. A conditioned soul may be very good and act in the mode of goodness, but still he is conditioned under the spell of material nature. A devotee, however, acts completely in the direction of the Supreme Lord. Thus his actions may not appear to be of a very high quality to the common man, but the devotee has no responsibility. Yeah, so he talks about a conditioned soul who, under the modes of material nature, has this false proprietorship, and under that false proprietorship, he lords it over material nature. While Srila Prabhupada makes this nice point that even if he's in a mode of goodness, but he's still conditioned. Compared to that, a devotee who acts under direction of the Supreme Lord or his bona fide representative, even though outwardly to a common man he does not act. The common man might feel that he is not acting responsibly, but the devotee has no responsibility. He completely takes shelter of the Supreme Lord and his bona fide representative. An example of Arjuna, where he initially didn't want to fight his grandfather and spiritual master, but in the direction of the Supreme Lord, who accepted him as a spiritual master, now he gives up that false proprietorship and gives up his attachment, material attachment. Yeah. And nice point that's the difference between liberation and conditioning. One who is conditioned and one who is in a liberated state. Yeah.
Thank you, Madhupati Prabhu.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So that seems like the epitome of freedom from responsibility and reactions for one's actions in Krishna consciousness. And I imagine even if there are reactions, so to speak, that they don't control you. But then I think in the material world, there's always some kind of reaction for an action that one takes. And I think sometimes in the neophyte stage, we believe that, oh, I can do this for Krishna and that for Krishna, and no negative consequences will ever come about. And that's true in a sense, but if we're in the neophyte stage, then if something happens which is not to our liking, and we have to take some sort of, endure some sort of suffering for it, then we think, oh, I'm getting a reaction. I'm supposed to be acting in Krishna's service, but I'm getting a reaction. But it seems like the real freedom is in your sense of detachment and leaving everything in Krishna's, everything is on Krishna, whether you apparently something there's some apparent consequence that comes to you. I can't think of anything specific that wouldn't be ridiculous, like robbing a bank or something like that. Nobody's really going to rob a bank for Krishna, but it just seems like that the real freedom is that you don't claim proprietorship, that you're really leaving it, you're doing it for Krishna, and whatever happens is also from Krishna, and it's not a material reaction. Maybe I'm not understanding correctly.
Good. Time has come.
Oh,
The time has come. Who would like to lead the closing kirtan? Thank you all for your comments. Thank you, Guru Maharaj. It's so nice to hear your voice again.
yes.
And the transcendental knowledge that flows through it. Hare Krishna.
Yeah.
And the practical knowledge. Sitapala Vichurna. Who would like to lead the closing kirtan? Any volunteers? Madhupati Prabhu?
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sanyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Good. Hare Hare Hare. Jai Vishnupada Paramansa Prabhupacharya Stottara Sada Sisamit Divine Grace Esi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupada Paramansa Prabhupacharya Stottara Sada Sisamit Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Divine Grace Esi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. आनंद कोटि वैष्णव की जना विचार है दास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिव सदि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप कपिनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोपीनाथ की जय। वृंदावन धाम की जय। मैं प्रणव धाम की जय। नैना तुलसी जगन्नाथ धाम की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। गंगम यमुना की जय। श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी की जय। वेद में ट्रांसलेट बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की जय। हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। Nitai God Premanande, all glories to Assembly, all glories to Assembly, all glories to Assembly. Srila Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj ki jai. Maharaj.
Thank you very much, Madhupati Prabhu. And thank you all devotees who have participated in this Bhagavatam study, and especially His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Panchatattva Prabhu. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Jayadvaita Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Bhaktivinoda ki jai.
Jai.
Gaur Premanande.
Hari
Hari
Om.
Bol.
Hari Bol.
Thank you so much.
Hari Hari. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.